Yeah. We're going to be looking at Satan's global agenda tonight. And tonight we're going to be looking at some personalities that will be prevalent during the tribulation period. Now, when most people think of the Antichrist, they hear that term, they usually think of one person, right? It's going to be some political leader. He's going to come, show up on the scene, and he's going to wreak havoc. John, in his epistle to, I think it was 1 John, he said, we know that Antichrist is coming. So he's told us that. He said there's lots of Antichrists in the world, but we know that Antichrist is coming. But most people don't realize that during the tribulation, it's not just one Antichrist. In fact, it's not even two Antichrists. But there's actually three personalities that make up Antichrist that are going to be leading the way during the tribulation period and ushering this terrible time. And chapter 13 tells us about two of the three. Chapter 17, when we get there, will tell us about the third personality that will be on the scene, leading the events of the tribulation period. But tonight, we're going to be looking at two of them. One of them is called the beast from the sea, and the other one is called the beast from the land. And these are two personalities, two individuals that are going to rise up on the scene and lead the world into the tribulation period. So let's take a look at these individuals. John introduces to us the very first one in verse 1. It's the beast from the sea. And John says, "Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name." All right, so John introduces us to this first beast. He says, rising up out of the sea. Now notice the description of this beast here in verse 1. He has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Have we seen this beast before? When did we see this beast before? Last week we saw this beast, that's right. And we saw this beast when we were in Daniel. You remember in Daniel? We saw this beast before. This is the beast that comes from the revived Roman Empire.
Yeah, the land.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't get is when you said in the beginning, one beast is from the sea and the other is from the land.
Right. This beast is from the sea. And I saw a beast rising from the sea.
Oh.
So let's see what we can find out about this coming beast. John says he saw this beast rising out of the sea. Now, what does that mean? Well, if we look at Revelation chapter 17 and verse 15, the sea represents the Gentile nations, the nations of the world. You see, the beast will arise from the turbulent conditions that were present during that period in the Gentile nations. See, he rises from the Gentile nations. He's a Gentile. He comes up from the Gentile nations. And remember, Paul said in the last days, perilous times will come. Remember that? He's told us that. Jesus said there'd be wars and rumors of wars, false Christs, pestilence, earthquakes in various places, famine. So when the Antichrist shows up, the world will actually be crying out for leadership. And from the nations, from the Gentile nations, this revived Roman Empire, this one leader will rise up. This is a political leader. And he will rise up to take control of the chaos. Now notice his appearance. He says he has 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns. Now, if you'll recall, in Daniel, he told us about the last great empire that will rise up on the world. He described it as a terrible looking beast that he couldn't even describe almost. The first great kingdom was Babylon, represented by a lion. We saw that in Daniel. The second great kingdom was the kingdom of Greece. The Medes and the Persians, which was represented by a bear. The kingdom of Greece came after that. He was represented by a leopard. The fourth kingdom was represented by this indescript beast, this terrible-looking beast. And that was the Roman Empire, because it was so strong and so brutal that it was represented by this terrible beast. But he said in Daniel, when he saw this beast, he said from that beast there was this 10-head, 10-horn monstrosity. What Daniel was seeing was the last form of the Roman Empire, which is yet to rise to power. You see, the Roman Empire will rise again and will rule the world in the last days. The Antichrist will come from that Roman Empire. That's all in Daniel. And it says that the Antichrist will subdue 3 kings, because there's going to be 10 kings ruling the revived Roman Empire. The Antichrist is going to subdue 3 of them and take over power and take over control and reign on the earth with the remaining 7 leaders. And that's why he says 7 heads. So it's interesting how the book of Revelation ties back into the book of Daniel. He's describing the same person, this Antichrist, this beast who comes up from the nations, from the Roman Empire to take control. Now notice the agenda of the beast. On his head's a blasphemous name. Now we saw that in verse 2. That's what verse 2 tells us, that he has blasphemous name. Now remember when we were in the beginning of Revelation, we looked at the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? And the first horseman was a horseman on a white horse, riding in. And we talked about that horseman a little bit. Who rides in on a white horse? Jesus rides in on a white horse, but war doesn't follow him. Somebody else is riding in on a white horse. It's the Antichrist who rides in on a white horse, pretending to be a hero. See, he's coming in as a solver of problems. He's coming in as a friend of Israel. He's going to make a covenant with Israel and give them peace and prosperity and security and pretend to be their friend. But in reality, he is a blasphemer. His agenda is to do the will of Satan. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4 tells us that this one opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself. You see, the whole agenda of the Antichrist is to proclaim himself God and have all worship him. But in reality, when they worship him, who do you think they're really worshiping? Actually worshiping Satan himself. So you see that the power of the beast comes from Satan. John says in verse 3, "Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority." Now, this beast, John says, was like a leopard and a bear and a lion. Now in Daniel, again, in chapter 7, the nations of the world, Babylon, Greece, Medes and the Persians, they are described as a leopard, a lion, and a bear. So this Antichrist who comes to the throne comes with all the pomp and the power of previous world empires. This one that's coming will truly be a world leader in every sense of the word. The whole world will follow him. He won't be a regional person. He won't be a isolated personality. He is going to, when he arrives, is going to captivate the entire world. And notice who gives his power. Dragon gives his power, his authority. Does Satan have that ability to give somebody great power like that?
If God lets him.
Yeah. Well, you remember when Jesus was tempted? And Satan said, if you bow down to me, what would Satan give him? Remember? All the kingdoms of the world. Yeah. Satan apparently has that power to give whoever he wants, under the permission of God, all the kingdoms of the world. Well, this one who's coming will be one who Satan gives all the kingdoms of the world to. He will have all the world's allegiance, as did the previous kingdoms that rose and fall. And he will have his power and his authority from Satan himself, which is kind of a scary thing to think about. Notice in verse 2 it says he gave him his power, his throne, his great authority came from Satan. But there's other places that say that too. For example, Daniel 8:24, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. So this one that's coming is going to be powerful in the power of Satan. 2 Thessalonians 2:9 says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders. So he's truly going to be a world leader. But notice the wonder of the beast. And here's what John says. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So not only will this rising Antichrist be a charismatic and powerful world leader, something happens that causes the entire world to wonder and follow after the beast. Notice what it says. One of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. Now, there have been commentators who have commented on this, that apparently what happens is that this Antichrist, this world leader who comes on the scene, is assassinated. He's killed. He's mortally wounded. But he's healed. He is resurrected. He is completely unscathed. Whatever tragedy befell him, the world thought he was dead, and he probably was. But he is alive. So they marveled. They wondered. What if you read this headline? He is alive. Stunned world amazed after assassinated leader comes back to life. Do you think the world would respond to something like that? Probably exactly as John said he would, right? They would marvel. Now, some speculate this could refer to the Antichrist being resurrected, or the resurrection of the Roman Empire as a whole. Because the Roman Empire today is basically dead. It will be raised again in the last days. The empire will. Maybe it's referring to that. I kind of think it's referring to the person of Antichrist being killed and raised from the dead. 11:17 says, woe to the worthless shepherd. Now this is a reference to the Antichrist, who leaves the flock. A sword shall be against his arm and against his right eye. His arm shall be completely withered. His right eye shall be totally blind. So this kind of confirms that we're talking about some kind of mortal wound that this Antichrist suffers that causes his arm and his eye to be deformed and disabled. But he survives. He rises from the dead. Notice what happens because of this. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast. Now imagine that.
So now they're worshiping Satan.
They're actually in the world going to be openly worshiping Satan. Now they may not be worshiping at the feet of Satan. They may be worshiping idols or you know. Yeah. But the reality is they're going to be giving their allegiance and worship to Satan, who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast. So they're going to fall down at the feet of the beast and actually worship him as God, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue 42 months. What's that? That's 3.5 years. And what does he do in that 3.5 years? He opens his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints, to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe.
Is this the second 3.5?
Yeah, this is during the Great Tribulation period, second half. So Satan gives this beast power to cause havoc on the earth for 3.5 years. He is a blasphemer of God, a brutalizer of God's people, and a bully over the nations. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. You see, now this kind of confirms what we just said. Those on the earth will worship him. Those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life will not worship him. It is a cut and dry thing.
Those whose names are in the book of
Right.
life.
Those whose names are in the book of life will not worship the Antichrist. Those who are not written in the book of life will. What's the book of life? What's the Lamb's book of life?
That's all those that are saved.
Yeah, when you get saved, your name is written in the Lamb's book of life. That's right. So during the tribulation period, there will be no question where you stand. That's what this is saying. You will either be for the beast or you will be for Christ. There will not be independence. Those whose names are written in the book of life will suffer greatly during this time, but will be rewarded for their patient enduring. It's a terrible time. Now notice the beast's ultimate fate. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. In other words, this is a verse of comfort to those who are suffering during the tribulation period. What will the tribulation period be for those that follow Christ? They will be led into captivity. They will be killed with the sword. That is the fate of those who trust Christ and follow him during those 7 years of tribulation.
After the original first rapture.
Yeah.
The only rapture.
Yeah. But notice what God is saying. He's saying, look, those who are doing those things will suffer the same fate.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what Jesus said, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. God is telling the people, yes, you will suffer, but it's only for a short period of time, and God will take vengeance on those who are persecuting you. That is the patience and faith of the saints during that period of time, as they will look toward the end of this period. It's not a long period. Although it is an intense period of suffering, they will be led away captive and killed. But this verse of comfort is given to remind them that God will reward those who are his and repay those who have rejected and persecuted his people. It will take great faith and patience to overcome, but the reward is sure. God says, be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he shall also reap. And that is what he is saying here. And so that is the Antichrist, the beast from the land of sea. Now what about the second one? Remember I mentioned there was a second beast. That is the beast from the land.
It's going to be the false prophet.
False prophet. Stan says it's a false prophet. Let's see. He says in verse 11, I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. So can we identify this second beast? Well, I think it's pretty clear who this is, and I think you're right. Notice it says he had, first of all, he's coming up out of the earth. What is that a reference to, do you think? If the sea is the Gentile nations, what would the beast coming from the land be? From the earth.
All of Israel.
I think it's from Israel.
All of Israel, which includes all
Yeah, yeah. This is a beast who comes up out of the land, out of the earth. That term, that word earth, really has to do with a geographical location. And other places in the Bible tells us that there will be a false prophet who rises up out of the land of Israel to lead that nation astray. And he will be another beast. Well, notice what it says. He had horns like a lamb. Now, we have seen who the lamb is. Who's the Lamb of God? He's Jesus. But he says he has horns like a lamb. In other words, he is a false Jesus, a false Messiah. He's not the lamb. He only appears to be the lamb. But he speaks like a dragon. And who's the dragon? We really saw before. That's Satan. So here we're seeing a beast rising up from the land. He does not come from the Gentile nations, the sea. He comes from the earth. And the word for earth can be translated a country, land enclosed within fixed boundaries, a tract of land, territory, a region. So we're talking about a specific place here that this person will rise up. Now, it's the view of most conservative commentators that this is a false Messiah coming to lead Israel astray. The second beast comes from Israel, and his purpose is to assist Antichrist in his conquest of the world. You know, have you ever thought, how in the world is the Antichrist going to get all the Muslims and all the Jews and all the world together in one big happy family? That's what he's going to do. He's going to bring everybody together and make a peace agreement with Israel and usher in, supposedly, a time of great prosperity and safety for the world. How does he do that? Yeah, in the first half. Yeah. How he does it is right here. Who leads Israel into allegiance to the Antichrist? It's going to be the false Messiah. He's going to show up and say, here I am, I'm your Messiah, the one you've been waiting for. Follow Antichrist. How about the Muslims? The Muslims are waiting for a Messiah as well. He's called the Mahdi. Have you ever heard of the Mahdi? The Mahdi in Islamic literature is a leader who is coming back to lead the world into the utopia of Allah worship. He is going to be received by the Muslims as a Muslim leader leading the world in of Allah. And you know who's going to be helping him do that, according to the Muslim literature? Jesus, the Messiah. The Jewish Messiah will be raised and will help the Mahdi lead the world into worship of Allah. Yeah. So they have the same thing going on in their literature. They're being prepared for the coming of this Antichrist and the false prophet. Israel's being prepared for the coming of the false prophet. The second beast comes from Israel. He appears as a Messiah, like a lamb. Now, Jesus said this. He said to his disciples, the days will come when you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. And they will say to you, look here, or look there. Do not go after them, or follow them. For as the lightning that flashes out of one part of heaven shines to the other part under heaven, so also the Son of Man will be in his day. See, Jesus is warning them not to go after these false Messiah that comes up. He is predicting that he will arise, and not to follow him, because when the Messiah comes, when the true Messiah returns, it'll be like lightning flashing from the east to the west. And in John 5:43, he says this, I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you will receive. So Jesus is predicting that the nation of Israel will receive this false prophet, this false Messiah who rises from the earth, pretending to be the Messiah, but is really an agent of Satan. But they will receive him. They will follow him. Notice what it says in Zechariah 11. And the Lord said to me, next, take for yourselves the implements of a foolish shepherd, for indeed I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for those who are cut off, nor seek the young, nor heal those that are broken, nor feed those that still stand, but he will eat the flesh of the fat, tear their hooves in pieces. You know, it was Jesus that said, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but are inwardly ravenous wolves. That is the definition of a ravenous wolf. When this false Messiah comes, as Zechariah identifies him, he will come as a foolish shepherd, coming to tear the people like a ravenous wolf. And they will accept him being fooled completely by him. And you know, there's a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Kaduri. Rabbi Kaduri died a few years back, but before he died, he was extremely influential in Israel. In fact, when he died, over 100,000 people attended his funeral. That's how popular he was. But before he died, he wrote the name of who he said the Messiah was on a small note. And he requested that it remain sealed until after his death. So he said he figured out by studying the scriptures and by praying. And when he died and the note was opened, it was revealed what many have known for centuries, that the name of the Messiah is Yeshua, Jesus. And he stated, well, before I get into what he said, how do you think that, what kind of turmoil do you think that caused in Israel? For this prominent rabbi to say, I have figured out who the Messiah is, it's Jesus. I mean, there was uproar in Israel over this, because this guy was really influential. And for him to come out and say, it's Jesus, he's the Messiah. They had a real fit.
He didn't do it until after his death.
Yeah, well, he didn't want to reveal it after his death. But notice what he did. He also in this note said how the Messiah would come, how they would know him. He said, the revelation of the Messiah will be fulfilled in two stages. First, the Messiah will actively confirm his position as Messiah without knowing himself that he is the Messiah. Now, does that sound like Jesus of the Bible? No, it doesn't at all. Then he will reveal himself to some Jews, not necessarily to the wise Torah scholars. It can be even simple people. Then only will he reveal himself to the whole nation. The people will wonder and say, what? That's the Messiah? Many have known his name, but have not believed that he was the Messiah. You see, the Messiah that this rabbi says is coming is not the Jesus of the Bible. It's another Jesus. It's a false Messiah. It's a Messiah that doesn't even know he's the Messiah. But he will reveal himself as the Messiah to the nation, completely fooling the people. Jesus, remember, said, as lightning comes from east to the west. That's how I'm returning. I'm not just going to sneak up on you. So who is this guy describing? He's describing the one that John is saying is coming, the false Messiah, the one that Israel will receive to their great destruction. Because notice what the beast does. He exercises great authority, this false Messiah. It says he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. Now, who gave the first beast his authority? Satan does. So he exercises all of the authority of Satan that was given to the first beast. He is just as powerful, just as satanic, just as evil as the first beast. And notice what he does. He causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So here this false Messiah shows up in Israel and tells Israel, follow this guy. He's the one you want to follow and worship. And they do. Not all of them, but many in Israel do. He uses his authority to deceive the world and lead them into idolatrous worship of Antichrist. So it's quite quite a duet here. Now notice what else he does. He does great wonders. He performs great signs, so that even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Why wouldn't they believe he's Messiah, right? He does miracles. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, which he was granted to do. Granted by who? By Satan. Gave him power to do these signs in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. So his whole purpose is to lead the world into a false worship of the Antichrist. And in doing so, he makes an image. Now we're going to see something about this image. Notice what it says. He was granted power to give breath to this image of the beast that he makes. That the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So one of the things that he does, including great signs and miracles, is he creates this image of the beast. And he causes the whole world to fall down and worship the beast. He makes this beast speak, and he causes those who would not worship the beast to be killed. Now, in this day of computer technology and robotic wizardry, it's hard to imagine what type of image this could be. Because most of us see things that we would say, that's just computer graphics, or that's just some robotic thing, or, we're not dazzled much anymore. But for some reason, this image is going to cause a completely different kind of reaction among the world. So we don't really know what this is. Hologram, we don't know. But he creates some kind of image that must be extraordinary, well beyond what would be expected in today's world. And so the world will be amazed by it and follow the beast. And notice what he does as well. He causes all, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. We're going to see that that is for the purpose of controlling people's economy. When John wrote this, the technology did not exist to do it. We're going to see this Antichrist does. But today we're seeing government acting by forcing everyone into mandatory vaccines and lockdowns. So it's not hard to see and imagine something like this taking place, where the government would make everybody take a mark. You can't do what you need to do unless you have a mark. Notice what the mark is for, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So this is total control over everybody on the earth, keeping them under submission to the Antichrist by controlling their buying and their selling. If you were not able to buy or you were not able to sell anything unless you gave allegiance to the Antichrist, how long do you think it would be before you were history? Probably not long. Not long at all. Now, of course, in John's day, this was not possible. Is it possible today? Yeah. It's actually a reality with microchip technology and electronic commerce. You pull out your credit card, that little gold little chip on there. That's a computer-generated chip. It's embedded in your credit card, and it does a whole bunch of stuff. And if your credit card company wanted to, they could control all your buying and selling by the use of that little chip. Right now, they're not doing that, but someday they will. Did you know that today in India, for example, they are pushing for a total cashless society, getting rid of cash? In fact, on the Indian webpage, it says, promoting digital payments within the government of India, guidelines for the electronic payment and receipt for cashless services. Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, envisions paperless, cashless, faceless services across the country. especially in rural and remote parts of India. MET-Ye further envisions common e-government infrastructure that will offer end-to-end transactional experience for a citizen, businesses as well as internal government functions, which includes accessing various services, making payments, receipts through electronic modes. Not buying or selling anything without the government of India's permission. So we see this already coming into fruition. And did you know that there's a company called SwipeMint that's now testing patent-pending microchip technology for payment processes like Apple Pay, but using implanted microchips? That's what that is. Sweden has that now.
In their wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Just go over it like that when
Yeah, you can get that now.
It's gonna be.
You can get that. They're pushing for it to be universal so that instead of a card or Apple Pay is you take your Apple, and you scan it to. They're doing it so you just scan a code.
I should better happen first because I'm not gonna take it. Then I'm gonna be martyred.
Well, here you go. Here's one more. CNN reported this.
Oh no.
You've heard of,
I'm not watching the news.
You've heard. Okay, you've heard of Amazon.
Yes.
You've heard of Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Amazon will let customers at some Whole Foods stores pay with a simple wave of their hand. How does this work? The company announced it is bringing Palm scanners to one of its Whole Foods stores in Seattle with plans to roll out the new payment system to 8 stores in the Seattle area in the coming months. Customers will hold their hands above the scanner for a contact-free payment method. According to Amazon, the palm scanning technology analyzes the minute characteristics of your palm, both surface area details like lines and ridges, as well as subcutaneous features such as vein patterns, in order to identify a customer, allowing them to use the biometric scan as an alternative and theoretically faster method of checking out than fumbling around with a credit card or cash. Wow!
Are you gonna get one? If the rapture can happen, I mean, we gotta move over to.
Interesting. Well, the whole point is the technology is here now. The technology is being utilized. Once the Antichrist comes on the scene, it will become a reality. Notice what he says here in verse 18. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. How many have not seen 666 on some scary show or some commercial about, the apocalypse? What does that mean? Well, we're not told. We don't know. We're not told exactly what it's a reference to. Many have speculated. We just don't know. But when he says, here is wisdom, it will be for those who have wisdom in that day to see the true meaning of that number. This will make sense to the people in the tribulation when this occurs. When the Antichrist comes on the scene and begins to do this, this number will mean something to them and will signify the truth of what the Bible has been saying all along, that this is the Antichrist and the tribulation is coming.
Wouldn't that be enough to cause some people to get on the news?
Well, for those that have wisdom. Not everybody will.
They'll be killed.
Not everybody will have wisdom. A lot of people go for the money. They go for the power. They go for the prestige. They go for the, hey, I want to be in with the big guy, They're not going to want to get their head chopped off, so they're going to make allegiance to Antichrist because they will be deceived. But there will be those who don't. And they'll say, no, I'm not going to do that. I see what's coming. So that's chapter 12.